Hi everyone, thank you for joining our panel discussion. Our topic for today is youth at risk. Before we begin, just a quick reminder of the housekeeping rules. So once again, please mute your mics unless otherwise stated. Secondly, do note that the entire event will be recorded and uploaded for future viewing. And thirdly, please submit your questions on Zoom under the Q&A tab and upvote the questions you would like to see answered first. Also, please indicate the panelist's name if you would like to address a question to a specific presenter. The aim of our discussion today is to paint in broad strokes what are some issues surrounding the identification of youth at risk, whether the current efforts are sufficient, and how do we ensure our volunteers are adequately prepared to handle the youths. To do that, we have a special group of panelists from various backgrounds to join us today. Firstly, we have Dr. Tanya, a senior lecturer at SUSS and a program manager at the SMU Lian Center for Social Innovation. Dr. Tanya was part of a published study which used the self-determination theory to better understand the needs of youth at risk from the lens of both social signals and the youth themselves. We're also going to benefit from the views of Edmund, the co-project director of Beyond Expectations. Beyond Expectations is a mentoring initiative in collaboration with Beyond Social Services. Started in 2018, their objective is to empower less privileged youths by bridging structural disadvantages they face in accessing educational resources. Through a strengths-based approach and relational mentoring, they aim to spark greater interest towards learning and hope to unlock both the potential of their mentees and mentors. Thirdly, we have Stefan, who is the head of operations for education and sports at Impart. Impart is a non-profit organization in Singapore that partners with caseworkers and social service organizations to support youth facing adversity through educational support, sports engagement, and passion projects. Impart has had over 100 volunteers working together with 80 youths, and Stefan has been overseeing weekly Impart operations, which provide support for youths from social service agencies such as Tribe, Fayette, and IMH through various developmental opportunities. Recently, Stefan has also been leading a pilot project in collaboration with Beyond Social Services to engage the rental flats in Lavender through Floorball. And last but not least, we have Yuvan, a banker by day and youth leader by night. He believes in deepening his experience in the private, public, and people sector to maximize his contributions to society. Yuvan is the chief curator at the Young Change Makers, an initiative by National Youth Council, through which he has given youths aged 15 to 35 a leg up to succeed. For 3 years, Yuvan has faithfully attended open mic sessions, listening to young people pitch, supporting them in their efforts to secure a National Youth Fund grant. He has also galvanized a group of volunteers to guide, coach, and mentor the youths. Now, could the panelists please elaborate a little further on your areas of expertise and also your general view on the youth at risk issues in Singapore?
Benjamin, you want me to go first?
Sure, you can start first. That'll be good.
Hi guys, thank you panelists. Just on a note, Dr. Tanya, I actually read your paper to prepare myself for the panel. So it's great meeting you in person. It's a great paper. So I mean, from my perspective, I come more from supporting ground-up initiatives for at-risk youth, right? I won't call it an issue, but I always call it a perennial challenge when you're trying to attract volunteers to volunteer with at-risk youth. Because as a demographic, there are certain nuances that feature within the at-risk youth community compared to others. So one, for instance, you need to build a very strong rapport with at-risk youth. It's a long-term commitment rather than ad hoc volunteering. Because for you to see the impact that you have made on a young person's life, it's not immediate. It takes sometimes years and sometimes even decades until the person reaches out to you and saying that, hey, you really made an impact. I think we're really looking for volunteers who have that commitment, who have that compassion, and most importantly, is the fit. And fit is something that you cannot see from a resume or just matching up from this basic database. It's really more, can you jive with that individual? So I won't call it an issue, but I'll call it a challenge that volunteers or organizations that want to create volunteering opportunities to match at-risk youth to mentors need to take into account when they're doing so.
Nice. Dr. Tanner, would you like to follow up with that?
Sure. Thanks, Benjamin. And thanks so much for your team for having me over this morning. And thank you, Johan, for going through the paper. I will provide a short synopsis of the paper for our audience who have not had the chance to read it yet. The reason I'm here today this morning is perhaps because I have published a paper on at-risk youth very recently in 2019. And the paper was a culmination of a study that we conducted here in Singapore amongst at-risk youth. And we took a dual perspective in the study where we wanted to understand the needs of young people from the perspective of the social service professionals as well as the youths themselves. So I'm going to start by asking everyone 3 simple questions. You can either show your agreement to the questions by using the thumbs up reaction, or you can just internally reflect on your answer to the question that I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you my first question. Is it important for you as an individual to feel loved and cared for? You can nod your head, because for those who I can see their videos with. The second question is it important for you to feel confident and competent in anything that you do in your life, whether it be specific talents or even small mundane activities that you do in your daily life? Okay. My third final question. Do you think it is important for you to feel autonomous, to feel volitional, and to feel that you can chart the course of your life without having others impose decisions on you? So let's say your answer, you all know your individual answers to these questions. And if your answer to these questions was a simple yes, what you're basically doing is that you're vocalizing your need for self-determination. And what psychologists believe is that this need for self-determination drives and motivates each one of us equally, irrespective of whether we are male or female, young or old, whether we're black or white, irrespective of our race, caste, creed, religion. We all are driven by this need for self-determination, by this need to feel autonomous, by this need to feel loved for and cared for, and also by this need to feel confident about our abilities. So we wanted to understand the needs of youth through this self-determination perspective, through this lens of self-determination. And for this purpose, we interviewed social service professionals. They included caseworkers, social workers, program supervisors, and we also interviewed the youths themselves. And we found that our study revealed a misalignment, not so much in the needs of youth, because both social service professionals and the youths considered these 3 needs to be very important and essential for them. But the misalignment happened in the service provision and the client expectations. Although our friends in the social sector are hardworking and well-intentioned social workers, were trying very hard to even incorporate many aspects of the self-determination theory in their work, maybe under different terminologies, not using the same terms that I just used, but they were not quite reaching that sweet spot. So we were trying to understand that what is the reason behind this gap? Why is the service that is being provided not meeting the expectations of the clients? And we found that based on the evidence and the responses that we got from the clients themselves, from the youth themselves, was that there was a lack of autonomy and there was a lack of sustained sense of relatedness in the program offerings for vulnerable youth. So there we found and there we felt that there was a need to channelize more attention and resources in this direction. We also asked our youths to voice which were their areas of improvement, and they said and they asked for better and more academic support. They asked for more diversified recreational activities. They wanted more structural facilities. They also wanted less stringent rules. And most importantly, they said that they wanted more in-depth mentoring and more long-term relationship building, which is what Yuvan also mentioned just a while ago. So for me, the way I look at it is that it takes a village to raise a child. So the onus of providing a conducive environment around young people falls on the shoulders of everyone and anyone who is engaged with these people, whether it be parents, teachers, community workers, probation officers, mentors. And if we can build this sustained effort towards supporting their self-determination, I think we can go a long way in supporting young people. So with that, I would pass over the time to other planners to share their views. Thank you.
Thanks for that quick synopsis of your entire paper that you've written. Perhaps, Stefan, you want to chime in on that as well, and you can also share your views.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Stefan. Thanks, Benjamin, for having me here today. Yeah, so for me, I oversee the operations at Impart. So Impart is a non-profit organization that seeks to partner with caseworkers and social workers to support youth facing adversity. And when we started, we focused a lot on providing them with the educational support needed to get past their national examinations, because research has shown how important it is to keep youths within mainstream education provision. Right, but over the years, we've tried to diversify to think about how else can we support these youths. And we realized that something that comes very naturally to them is their interest that they like doing on the side. So I've also been exploring a project with something that I'm passionate about, floorball, especially, and also that floorball is just getting more popular. But yeah, we're trying to diversify and use sports as well. But I think at Impact, perhaps one thing that I can highlight, one thing that we really keep at the core of what we do is also the sense of relationship building that I think the other panelists have talked about. No matter what we do, we always try to remind ourselves that, hey, that has to be the core, because as Dr. Tanya has mentioned, this sense of relatedness, this sense of a good, strong relationship is something that is really powerful, right? We found that at the end of the day, when we talk about the work that we do, sometimes we always focus on how we want to journey with youths, and in order to journey with youths, you have to build strong relationships with them, right? I mean, so whenever we talk to professionals in the social service agency about these youths, they always talk to us, they always let us know that when working with these youths, remember that you are just one of many faces coming into their lives, right? That they are essentially seeing a revolving door of volunteers who come in, say, hi, I'm here for you, and then leave, perhaps maybe a month later. And it's not just volunteers as well. I mean, it's a common practice among social service agencies to kind of hand cases after, you close a case, and maybe one FSC hands to a government ministry or an NGO. And that just illustrates some of the challenges that working with and journeying with youth at risk, some of the challenges that might present. On our end, we've also, faced various challenges when we say that we want to, build relationships with them, build strong relationships with these youth. Perhaps I can share a bit about those challenges. The first challenge is that when we talk about relationship building and we talk about mentorship, right? Something we've learned over the years through working with youth, but also kind of making mistakes along the way, is that mentorship is something that the youth chooses as opposed to something that we can impose on someone else. You can be the best person. I think you even mentioned about fit, right? You can be the best person, but if there's just no fit, you're not going to be his mentor. You can be called, oh, I'm the volunteer mentor here for you, but a mentor must be someone that he chooses. That's the first challenge of relationship building. I can come from all the right places, but if there's no fit, then it might not really work out. The second challenge is a sense of when volunteers join projects and try to come in to support youth at risk, we have to be very reflexive and understand how we are coming into this. Are we coming into this as in an ad hoc basis, and I just want to volunteer a little bit to give back? Because sometimes we find that the mindsets that we as volunteers have can stand in the way of genuine relationship building. For example, if we come in and we say, hi, I'm here to help you, I'm here to support you. I mean, when you're on the receiving end of that, to have someone that is saying all of that to you, it doesn't really sound like relationship building. It sounds like you're a service provider and you are the helper and I'm the helped. Right, and when we talk about journeying with youth, and especially when volunteers are not that old, I mean, university age, right? The youth look at you like, you're not much older than me. What's going on here, right? So when we say when we want to do relationship building, we have to be very careful about how we're coming in. Especially when what Yvonne mentioned, that if if you want to really help this, you need to be here for the long run. You cannot be here for one summer. I mean, if you can be here for one summer, but find the right programs that really cater to the kind of commitment that you're able to give. Yeah, so I think that those are just some of the things that I'll just share now. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Nice. Thanks so much for sharing about about Impact, and also like the challenges that you face in your experience with Impact. Perhaps Edmund, you would like to share a little bit about Beyond Expectations as well, and your views of the youth at risk issues.
Okay. Thank you, panelists. I think so some of the issues that Dr. Tanya, Yuvan, as well as Stefan brought up is actually really relevant to what I'm doing with Beyond Social Service in Henderson. So it's actually Beyond Expectation is actually a mentoring program that aim to allow youth in the area to have an avenue to express themselves in different forms. And we do 2 tracks. One is the academic support, whereby they get to express what are some of their concerns in terms of school lives as well as their academic needs. Other than that, we also deal with experiential activities. So we aim to allow mentors in our program to actually like what Stefan say, journey with the youth in a certain form of experiment, or like an activity whereby both the mentors as well as the youth can learn from it. It can be a social issue that we can open to talk about, and also certain forms of like experiments whereby you can see online where viral stuff. So the youths are actually much more competent in that sense, knowing what are some of the viral issues online, viral videos online, and we can actually bring it down on the table to allow them to let us understand more about their scope. So in Beyond Expectations, the key word for us is actually to provide opportunity. So it's an opportunity for the youth to actually learn and gain something. And I would say that one issue that we always bring about in our program is this word as well, because when we talk about opportunity, to many it may be seem to be something that we will be able to seize. When we see an opportunity, we'll immediately jump on it. But I think working in the rental estates as well as a lower income family group, it doesn't come that easily. There's a lot of resources that are not there for provided to them that readily as compared to the rest. And being in this program, when we started off being an academic support group. So we talk about tuition service, we talk about enrichment programs for the youth. And I think that these are the things that we are not able to, the youth are not able to openly receive them. And I think this is also the case whereby they have some form of like interest, but then they do not have many more avenues than the rest to actually explore on them. So we provide this opportunity for them to interact. We might not be, the mentors in the program might not be the experts or like the professionals in the field, be it like sports or like be it like us. But I think giving them an opportunity to actually interact with people or like youths in general like us with the same common interests, I think it will help them to grow as a youth and have an opportunity for them to learn more. So I think I bring about this point because I think one of the issue whereby we talk when we interact with youth in the community is that confidence level is an issue for them. So many of them felt that they are marginalized, and it stems from their family background, be it like financial issues or like the strained family relationship and all that. But and they feel much more vulnerable when we enter the community trying to build a relationship with them. They felt that like what Yuvan and Stefan mentioned, the time period whereby we are there in the community. So I have a youth that when I first joined the program as a co-project director, so one of the youth came up to me and said, "Hey, are you going to be here for how long?" Like they asked me, "Is it like a 3-month thing?" I bet it's going to be a 3-month thing. So I think that these are the things that we have to question ourselves as like mentors or like ground up initiatives. So people see ground up initiatives as programs that comes and go, and they have a very short lifetime in the community. They see people come, they see people go. But I think the main aim here for us is actually to build lasting relationship, and we do have mentors in the program that are able to sustain this kind of like prolonged interaction with the youth. They stay in the program for 1 or 2 years just to see the youth finish their national exams, and then after that proceed on to the next stage of their life. And I think we celebrate this kind of like milestones or like achievement together with the youth, so that they can feel that they have a safe space for them to express themselves, and we provide this platform for them. And I think through this program is an enriching environment for the mentors as well. So for us, we don't we not only pay our attention to the youth, but also the development of the mentors in this program, because we want them to spark the next program in the community, and not just be that passerby or like a come and go figure that used to see us to be. So yeah, that's what we do here at Beyond Expectations. And on to you, Ben.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for the quick introduction on Beyond Expectations as well. So I think those were all really diverse views, and I'm really excited to continue our discussion. But before we go any further, I think it's good if we align on the definition of youth at risk for today. So I think the definition that we're working with today will be basically young people aged between 12 and 21 years of age with personal problems or adverse structural circumstances. And these may be people who have dropped out of school, may be homeless, or engaged in other illegal activities. And underpinning such circumstances are usually the prevalence of other factors as well, such as poverty, family dysfunction, and disturbed neighborhoods. So I think to kick off our discussion as well, Yuvan, given your experience working with senior policy makers in the PMO and also MSF, what are some of the common issues that you see the government trying to solve regarding youth at risk?
Maybe I just share about what's happening during COVID. I think COVID-19 has really, it's impacting youth in general, but more specifically for at-risk youth or those from vulnerable communities. And it's not just an infrastructure issue, right? So recently there have been many initiatives to provide laptops to vulnerable students or students in the lower income bracket. But it's not just giving the laptop and say, hey, go ahead and use it, but it's ensuring that there's a good family environment for you to use your laptop in. Like how many people are there in the room? Like right now we're having a very conducive environment for us to have these kind of online sessions. But if you come from these kind of vulnerable communities, right, you could be in the living room and the entire family is there. And so how much of privacy is there when you're doing your education? How much of support are you having from your parents? Also, if you look at the family structure, if these individuals, parents are essential workers, then they're going through extreme amount of job stress during this period of time. And if you're not an essential worker, if let's say you are working and your jobs are actually more vulnerable right now, and so that creates additional stresses. So, I mean, you cannot just say that this is a MSF or a PMO concern. It's really a whole of society, a whole of government approach, because there's so many other structural issues that underpin why youth become an at-risk youth. So, we need to look at it in a more holistic sense. But I think that focusing on the home environment and not just looking at just digital infrastructure, but ensuring that they have a good, stable environment to at least work and study and engage with friends online, I think is going to be increasingly crucial. And one of my major concerns is actually the digital divide occurring between at-risk youth and youths who have affluence right now. Because now we're only seeing there's a lot of emphasis on it, and we're just seeing the start, but as more other problems start to escalate, these may be prioritized within the society. And we don't want to see a divergence of experiences by youth from at-risk and non-at-risk on how they engage in the digital space.
Yeah, thanks for that sharing, especially on the digital front. I think that's something that's very relevant now, especially in light of COVID-19. Yeah. Dr. Tanya, do you have any other issues you would like to share regarding youth at risk from your perspective as a psychologist as well?
Well, Benjamin, I think the way that we are defining youth at risk is also something that requires, the narrative needs to change around that a little bit, because yes, these are individuals who may have run away from home, they may be dropped out of school, they may be taken to substance abuse, and so on and so forth. But this kind of conceptualization actually misses those factors that put them at risk in the first place. So like you said, the family discord or the poverty issue, or if there is disability in the family, there's academic pressure to deal with in Singapore. All these factors need to be taken into account. So our conceptualization in our study for youth at risk included both those young people who had exhibited social and behavioral misconduct, but also those who were at risk because of all these structural and familial issues. So I think this expansion of definition needs to take place, because I believe that a lot of work that's being done in the community, whether it be work of Beyond Social Services or organizations like INMART, they do a lot of work with individuals who cannot fit the definition of, because there are no aberrations in their behavior, so to speak, right? But these kids are still struggling on a daily basis. They have a lot of challenges. So I think this expansion needs to take place when it comes to defining youth at risk.
Yeah. Thanks for that elaboration as well. Definitely, I think that's something that we don't consider because we are normally, most volunteers are typically on the ground, so they don't see things from such a high level perspective. So thanks for that. Perhaps, Stefan, you would like to chime in as well on like the issues that you see the youth at risk face through your past experiences with Impart.
I think similarly for us at Impart, when we look at the term youth at risk, so first of all, it's a label, and when we're working with the youths, just a simple litmus test for me is that if I wouldn't say something in the presence of the youth by calling him, oh, we are a youth at risk program, that means that we must ask ourselves, is that the term that we should be using when the youths are not around as well, right? So in Impart, we try to use the term kind of youth facing adversity because we feel that reflects the truth of the situations that they are in. That these are youths in very difficult circumstances. It's not necessarily bringing the attention to something inside of them that makes them a juvenile delinquent, for example, right? Because there has been research published by MSF that shows that among youths who exhibit kind of problem behaviors, it's not very uncommon to see that these youths were also the victims of abuse when they were young, physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse. Right. So youth facing adverse, as in, so some of these youths have adverse childhood experiences that when they grow up, it leads to the manifestation of behavior that the larger society would label and say, oh, these are juvenile, these are people that you don't hang out with, right? So one big focus. One we have to face is how then do we prevent childhood maltreatment amongst youths? Because we start to see that actually a lot of the challenges faced in emotion regulation and distress tolerance and self-control can actually stem from early childhood experiences, right? And when we start seeing it in this lens, we shift the problem away from, oh, these are, we shift the focus away from, these are youths who have problems that we need to fix, instead of, and it shifts over to how these are youths that are the victims of abuse, of structures and family systems that gave them a really, really difficult environment to kind of grow up in. And when we start to see these youths as victims as opposed to perpetrators, I think it changes a lot of how we kind of approach the work that we do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. And thanks really for that insightful sharing as well. Edmund, perhaps you also like to chime in on that with experience and beyond.
Okay, I think coming from a ground initiative, I think one of the key things that we do is actually to identify whether this idea of a relationship building, and I think it's a personal kind of like relationship building with us to them as well. So I think the notion that we are trying to publicize in school and that is something that deters them from interacting with people well. So I think coming from this advantage is really something that, yeah, so you all can hear me, right? Yeah, so I think coming from a disadvantaged background, I think they tend to live up to the label, I would say. I put in quotation mark because I think this is not exactly true of the youth that we are interacting with in the community. And they will just act according to how the people perceive them to be. So you tend to listen to them sharing with you more about like school related issues, so like they get in fights in school and all that. But when you ask them why do they do that, it's because it's really because that sometimes people don't take the opportunity to go and understand them better. And sometimes they themselves are actually a victim in school. So I think these are pretty much rather trivial kind of like issues that we don't really talk about, like an individual in how are they dealing with issues that they are facing in schools. And I think this is something that we really should spend some time to look at it as well. Is it because of the environment that they are in, or is it because of the way that they portray themselves to be? So I think when it comes to social interactions, they tend to be a little bit more vulnerable because of the background that they are in. Some of them are actually lower track learners, so they take a longer time to understand people, understand how to communicate with people. They are also tend to be slower in like learning in terms of the academic subjects and all that. But they are still generally there to facilitate that kind of interaction. It's just that like people really don't understand where they are coming from. So I think these are the things that we really want to bring across to the youth, that we are building a safe space for them to express themselves. Like they can express it in many forms, be it in their own words, or like be it through arts, or like in terms of like team bonding kind of activity like sports. You see how they will portray their own individual kind of like attitude towards certain things. And I think these are more comprehensive kind of like matrix when you deal with youth at risk. They are in that bracket, but I would say that like sometimes they are just like myself when I'm younger back in school. It's just that I have a better platform and a more stable foundation for people to understand me. So this is the reason why we should like the program Beyond Expectations is trying to bring across to the youth a safe space and all that. So I think coming out from the circuit breaker during the COVID period is also a tough period for the youth in the area as well. So we do as a project director, we do a lot of like house visits after the circuit breaker, because I would say that we are, as a ground initiative, we are a bridge between the community workers and the family themselves. So we tend to want to understand how the family is doing and all that. I think all these add up to the stress of the youth, as well as like how they manage their family ties and like relationship. Yeah, so I think it's a trying time for them during this period. I would say like they find support relatively difficult to get, and this add on to a lot of like other issues that might surround them, be it like a mental kind of support, like even mental issues are something that we are talking to youth, be it like stress, or like whether they have some form of like self-harm kind of like mentality in them and all that. So I think it's a complex issue, and I think it's something that we should be delving into, even though they might seem to be a more localized kind of issue as compared to like a society level kind of like broader picture kind of like issues. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your nuances that you have learned across the past few years in your with your experience and beyond, and also especially from coming from a ground up initiative. Yeah. So I think now we also like to ask Yuvan, like, what are certain trends that you have observed targeting the youth at risk issues over the past few years, given your experience across so many different youth at risk initiatives in Singapore?
So I mean, earlier we talked about volunteering with at-risk youth, and how long-term commitment is required. But what I do not want people to just get away is that there's only one way to go about engaging at-risk youth, which is just through mentorship. I think one program that I've been privileged to be part of is Halogen's Foundation's Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NEFT. So I've been volunteering with them for about past 3 years in my work capacity. And so what they strive to do is try to help at-risk youth who are labeled as at-risk by their schools, create like entrepreneurship programs or ideas, and go through the whole ideation process step by step in a very structured approach. So I'm starting to see more of these kinds of programs coming up. But I noted that there's a question, and I also want to address this question on how do we motivate youth at risk to be more accountable in their actions through my answer as well. I don't think at-risk youth are unaccountable people. They're very accountable to their actions. It's just that where are you directing them to? So this is just very anecdotal. Like growing up, I have friends who are in gangs. The accountability in a gang is very high. It's not a very simple thing that you join a gang and you leave a gang. There are certain rules in place. So definitely accountability with people that we term as at-risk is actually very high. It's just that it's misdirected, or the sense of self-worth is tied to the gang. So if you were to de-link that and say that, hey, look, your sense of self-worth can actually come from creating a business idea, you'll be very accountable to a particular business idea. So I don't think at risk means you're unaccountable. You are a very accountable person. It's just that sometimes just misdirected. And back to the NEFT program, and why I think more of such programs should come into existence. It's about how you journey with a young person from ideation to development of the idea, and give them the confidence that maybe they may lack in their family environment, or maybe in the broader school environment, and work on these softer aspects of things that we often take for granted, but they do not experience on a day-to-day basis. So there is a shift towards such programs, but I think more can be done in terms of how we build the confidence, how they build self-love. And I think one increasing trend that I'm quite concerned is actually cyberbullying and digital mental health in a digital space, because that's very hard to really pinpoint exactly when at-risk youth goes through that phase. And yeah, so that will be it. I mean, getting more programs that focus on more building confidence, soft skills, a sense of self-love, and engaging them online.
Yeah, I think those are definitely relevant, especially in light of COVID and everything is going digital. So those are definitely new issues that we have to deal with. Yeah. Dr. Tanya, could I also touch on a bit more on your paper where you shared a little more on the findings of the misalignment between the social service programs and the youth needs? Could you just elaborate a little more on that?
All right. So basically, what we were trying to get at by looking at the perspectives of the social service professionals as well as the youths themselves was to really see that if I step out into this world of young people with the idea that I want to make an improvement in their lives, then am I achieving that? So it's not a question. I think there's a lot being done in Singapore already. But the critical question is that whether what is being done is creating its intended impact or not. So we were trying to get to the bottom of that question. And because of that, when we asked both the youths as well as the social service professionals about what they think are the most critical issues surrounding young people, they actually was a lot of congruence and alignment in what they thought was important. So they both thought that self-determination was important, self-love was important, the presence of a caring adult in their lives was important, them to feel autonomous was important. But what was happening was that there was a gap in the way the programs were being delivered, especially in the residential facilities. So we did interview a lot of youths who were assigned to live in these residential homes, and they were subjected to very strict regimented programs, and that had an impact on the youths themselves. They felt a bit stifled with the best intentions of the social workers at heart. And the social workers also did face a lot of challenges such as staff turnover, high number of caseloads and manpower constraints. But having said that, there was agreement in the study that more can be done. And if we can just step back and ask ourselves as individuals who are in the helping profession or who are in a space where we interact routinely with young people, that whatever I am doing with this person, is it promoting this person's sense of relatedness? Is it helping this person feel that they have certain strengths? Or is it helping this person course or take the course, be actors in their own life? If our answer to those three fundamental questions would be yes, then I think we're on the right path. And with the best intentions of hardworking social service professionals at heart, they were still not able to achieve that, perhaps because of the structural difficulties that they also face in their work. So I think this is the gap that was there. I can give you a very small example. We also asked participants, the youth clients, to tell us what were the most popular and unpopular programs that they attended in social service organizations. And they said that the most unpopular programs was when they were made to sit and listen to workshops or lectures, didactic style lecturing on, say, the harmful effects of smoking, right? So they say we know we don't need to smoke. We know it's injurious to health. But the way these learnings were being delivered was something which was not in line with the age and stage of that person, because this is a person who's looking to establish his or her identity, and they do not want to be in this strict regimented scenario. So just giving you a small example of how this gap was manifested in the actual setting. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that example. I think it really highlights, it really proves, really goes to show the main point that you're trying to drive across. I think perhaps Stefan, would you, based on Impart as well. So I think a lot about the journey of Impart is being a very transformative journey. So on top of molding these youths into the ones that are less at risk of reoffending or facing other issues, what kind of values does Impart typically try to drive across for the youth? And also, do you have an aim for the youth that you have in your program?
I see. Okay, so I guess at Impart, one thing we are very wary of as we do our work is that we have to understand how each youth is really different, in the sense that other than just their individual differences and personal differences, their family circumstances are also very different, right? So even when we come in to say we want to support them with education, to set the bar of like, oh, everyone should get a B for their exams, that's being really unfair to the youth, because they're all very different. For some of them, just getting them to sit for their exams and just literally just sitting, may not even be passing for their exams, can be a huge step forward for them, because there are also some youths who one story I can share is that adding to what Yuvan mentioned about how COVID-19 has been terrible sometimes when you have to study at home, is that we had to do online tuition with the youth. And the youth, the session was really noisy. The youth was always distracted. And then we asked the youth, like, oh, you know, why is it so noisy? You know, like, is there something you could do to make it less noisy? And they said, oh no, my mother's just watching TV. Then we're like, oh, can you tell your so after that we went to the social worker and said, okay, so could you tell like the mother to kind of not watch TV or something else? Like, it's just for this 1 hour, right? And the mother told the social worker, why should I not watch TV? Like, why is this boy studying? Study also won't go into JC, right? So don't study lah, right? And there was something that we learned, that you know, even sometimes family could stand in the way of us supporting issues. And so, okay, so the only reason why I'm talking about this is that when it comes to the outcomes or the values that they want to bring about for these youths, it has to start from a place of where exactly are these youths at right now. And when we journey with them, what kind of goals can we set for ourselves? It's very hard to kind of put you know, a blanket statement of where exactly these youths should go, or what exactly it should be. Especially what kind of values you want to teach. I mean, because I think also like what Yuvan mentioned, sometimes we come in with the assumption that these kids don't have the values and we have to teach them the values. But that isn't always the case. We see youths who are actually really intelligent, really able to kind of mobilize their friends and work in a team. You know, just in terms of where exactly are they, you know, putting their which context they're essentially exercising those values in. Yeah, so at Impact we try to be very sensitive to this, because you know that every youth is very different. What we hope to bring about for the youth is that wherever they want to go in life, can we be there to journey with them to help bring about that bridging, that bridging capital, to bridge them to the resources that they require. Because of, you know, when it comes to larger structural issues of the kind of resources that these communities have access to, sometimes that can stand in the way of getting them out of cycles of abuse, cycles of poverty, and cycles of reoffending. Yeah, so wherever the youth want to kind of hit in terms of being able to reach being able to access the next stage of education. For some of them it's IT, for some of them it's poly, and for some of them it's just getting a certificate that can help them get into that can help their job application. We try to journey along with them and support them in whatever way we can.
Yeah. Thanks for that sharing, especially about the anecdote as well. I think it really highlights certain issues that most of us aren't aware of in this current day. Perhaps, Edmund, you would also like to share a bit about that point that Stefan was talking about earlier?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like the objectives or goals that we want to set with our youth, I think we do it in a more milestone based. And I think one thing that we want the youth to understand is that they have a stake in this. So this, like when they join a program like us, it doesn't mean that we dictate where they are supposed to be at, or like what they like where they are supposed to go after their national exams and all that. I think it's more of like what they will want to achieve for themselves. So some of them give very practical and very realistic stuff. Oh, I want to start a business, and I want to make use of my skill of like a new painting, or like illustration to do something. So these are the goals that we think that we are able to help them in. So I would say that the mentors on board with us has a wide range of skill set. They come from different industries. They come from different background. So we facilitate this kind of growth together with the youth using the expertise of the mentor themselves. So we show them, and in this program there's a lot more of a doing rather than saying, I would say. So we sit down together with the youth to see those that are graduating from their national exams, what they want to do after this, so that we can actually help them to chart it out. So we are more or less a facilitator of their development rather than rather than someone that dictates where they go. So we are not here to replace that parental figure that they might be lacking in their family, but we are just here to let them know how to what are some of the things that they can consider so that they can make informed decisions for themselves. And you might be asking like, oh, so they are labeled as a youth at risk, would they be able to make this kind of decision? But I would say that they know what they want to do in the future. It's just that whether this is actually acceptable to other people. So most of us would think that, oh, the natural course of way is after my national exam, I just want to go into an institute and get a certification. Then right after a certification, I'll go and do a full-time job out in the industry. But I think some of them have other ideas about this. But because of the circumstances they are in, it's very difficult for them to execute it. So what we are trying to do here is to give them certain form of opportunity, or like find a workaround such that they will still be able to achieve what they want in this time period where they want to do this activity or goal that they have in mind. So I think going back to the question just now, whereby like whether youth, how do we like have to motivate youth at risk to be more accountable for their actions, is actually to give them a stake in what they are doing. And I think this is something that they might be lacking in their daily kind of life. They have people there to tell them what to do, be it in school, the teachers, or like the discipline master. At home, they have their parents or their siblings telling them that, hey, you should be doing this and you should not be doing this. So I think giving them a stake would give them how to like give them the actions that they want to achieve. And I think they are not unreasonable, I would say. And treating them with this is giving them a form of respect. And I think that us being older than them doesn't mean that we shouldn't respect their decision, shouldn't respect what they want to do in their life. And I think that is important, to have a motivation in what you want to do. And if you have that in mind, that is something that us as like a big brother or sister or like mentors can be there to facilitate them going to their goal.
Yeah. I think we really all agree on that point as well. I can see all the other panelists nodding their heads when you mentioned that point on giving them a stake as well. So I think you really touched on a very relevant point there. I think also perhaps for this discussion, it would be good if we also talk a little bit about how do we ensure that our volunteers are adequately prepared to handle such youths. So perhaps Yuvan, given your experience in the Young Changemakers program, how has your mentoring experience been, and how do you prepare these youths?
Okay, and I'm also going to once again try to answer a question that was just been fielded. So it talked about time commitment and volunteering and how do you seek alignment. So let me first, I cannot stress the importance of time commitment when it comes to volunteering. It's really very critical, because sometimes you're the only person that's going to mentor, facilitate a particular group. But in terms of, let's say, preparation of an individual to enter, let's say, an at-risk youth space or any other space for that matter, I think it's very important for alignment to occur between the individual and what the individual seeks to achieve. Because definitely, if you're thinking of volunteering in this particular area, you are trying to solve a big problem, or some sort of issue or a need in the community that you want to address. So I think one is that you need to be very focused on what you want to volunteer in and why you want to go about doing that. In terms of how you go about getting the right person, and slowly, there's no one size fits all or a natural progression when it comes to volunteering. It can go across to different causes at different levels. So at every point, you need to be also be very cognizant of your mindset and your capabilities and skill set. But you also need to understand what's your comfort level like. If you, let's say, you're not very comfortable with a particular demographic, then maybe start something that you're very easy with, or with your friends, to learn maybe some basics of facilitation. And then you think of your next step: how can I get these facilitation skills and apply to another group that I'm very interested to volunteer in? So it's really, you need to look at that from a very introspective perspective. One thing that I feel that maybe voluntary organizations need to do better is in terms of volunteer management and volunteer development, because there's a lot of focus on attraction, but nobody focuses on attrition, which occurs on a yearly basis. So for me, what I do is I actually use a lot of data and simple Excel files, like your attendance, what are your motivations, why are you still volunteering with us, and I review on a year-to-year basis. And if I notice like some particular volunteers do not maybe attend a lot of activities, I don't go into an approach where, oh, that's a bad volunteer. Rather, I think, what is the volunteer going through during this time period that maybe is accounting for the attrition? And it's just very reasonable requests, like a change in job, marriage, graduating from school, a very tough time in exams. And so when you are able to ascertain that, then you start thinking of what kind of support systems I can give to the volunteer so as to ensure I don't lose out this talent that we already tried to attract so hard. So to summarize, there are two parts to my response. One is that volunteers need to take ownership of their personal journey, and secondly, organizations need to do a better job on trying to see their volunteers' interest levels and developing them along the way.
Yeah, thanks for summarizing as well. I think those are really important points, especially that given that we have so many initiatives in the field today targeted towards youth at risk, but volunteer management and like the growth of the volunteers is something that we often neglect. So I think it's really good that you highlighted that point over there. Yeah, and so Dr. Tanya, based on your self-determination theory, are the needs of youth being adequately addressed, and also how is this translated across to the volunteers as well?
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin. I totally echo what Yawan was saying about the personal journey of each volunteer. I think we need to have a more critical stance on our short-term and long-term impact on the lives of these individuals. But I cannot begin to emphasize on the importance of training. Most well-intentioned volunteers need to go through a certain degree of training and socialization into the whole process, because I want to help and I'm very passionate about the fact that I want to help, but I may actually be at a crossroad where I really may cause more harm than good. So there are a lot of resources out there. There is one that I'd like to bring to everyone's notice, which is a very recent book that was written by my dear friend, Joe Chan. He's the head of youth services at Reach Community Service Society. And this is a very wonderful, interactive, very thin book, which can prepare anyone who wants to journey with young people to really question themselves and see what kind of perspectives they want to go in with when it comes to volunteering. And of course, that's why it's important that these kind of resources is something that we should get our hands on if we really want to go out there and help people. And this would go, I think they will go a long way in preparing volunteers adequately to engage with young people, in my opinion. I will also share the link to the ebook on the chat function for those who might be interested in looking at it later.
Great. Yeah, I was just about to ask you it would be good if you could send the link as well so that we can borrow the ebook on the NLB app. Yeah.
Certainly, certainly, I will share it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think similarly, Stefan, could you share from your experience from IMPART, like what are some of the issues that the volunteers face, and how do you adequately prepare your volunteers?
Yeah, for us, we a really big question we have to think about is that of volunteer development, volunteer training. That's exactly on point in terms of when you are a volunteer-run organization, your strength lies in your volunteers. They don't lie in you, the people at the top, who are at the top of the organization. They lie in your volunteers on the ground, because you can have all the ideas that you want in your head, but if you don't communicate that well to your volunteers, or your volunteers don't receive the guidance and support that they require, that message gets more and more diffused on the ground when it comes to what is the youth experiencing. Right. So similar to what I guess Dr. Tanya talked about mismatch between what kind of services are being provided as well as what the youth is experiencing on the ground. So there are various skill sets that I probably shouldn't go into, because there isn't one skill set that you kind of get and then you're like, okay, now I can work with all youth. And also volunteer development is not you have a start and then you stop and then, okay, I'm now a developed volunteer. Right? Volunteer development is a continuous, ongoing process. As the years pass, there are always new lenses through which we can learn to kind of work with using. For example, it's not recent, but a really important one that I recently learned. It's not a recent concept. Is that of trauma-informed care, which is when you work with youth, are we seeing their behaviors through the lens of our judgment of like, oh, you smoke, or you take drugs, or you join gangs, those are terrible, or do you see those behaviors as something that they were pushed to do because of certain traumatic events that they may have experienced as a kid. And traumatic events, that doesn't always have to be big car crashes or anything like that. It could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, deprivation when they were young. Right. So that's one thing that at Empower we're trying to work towards how do we equip volunteers with this trauma-informed lens. But again, the main point I want to put across is that there isn't one skill set that we must all try to achieve. That this is a process of learning and growing. And most importantly, one thing at Impact that we have learned to do over the years is that we must work with other people who have been in these youth lives. Don't come in thinking that, oh, I'm gonna do this on my own, right? Because from our experiences, sometimes we have had sometimes we learned that when the social worker is trying to work in one direction, the youth, the worst thing we can do is have a volunteer come in and work in the other direction, right? So when we talk about how to prepare volunteers to do what they do on the ground, we have to connect them to the larger ecosystem of people who are already in these youth lives. And my opinion is that the one way that we can really help to uplift this demographic is if we add to the current efforts by working together, instead of trying to come in and reinvent the wheel to like, okay, I'm gonna try to do everything on my own. We have to be in conversation with other people who know better and who have been, day in, day out with these youths already, right? One simple example that I can raise also is that if let's say okay, so for one of our youths who are tutoring, his N-levels is now on next week, this month essentially. 2 weeks ago, he texted us and he said, okay, everyone, thanks for your help, but I got no time to study anymore. My next 2 years will be super busy. Thank you, goodbye. And we're like, yo, N-levels next week, what's going on? Right? And us as student volunteers, it's very hard for us to be able to kind of understand what happens when a youth says something like this. What is it probably, what is it hinting at? Right? And this is where the experience and expertise of social workers in the field that has really worked very long with this youth can come in. So we made sure to link the volunteer up with his social worker to really discuss how can we move ahead, what's going on. And one thing we realized happened, which was that last week he discovered that he got his girlfriend pregnant, and now he's gone into full father mode. I have no time to study. I'm going to take care of this my new child, right? And so bring this example back to the question: how do you ensure volunteers are adequately prepared? It's not necessarily something that you should develop. As in, there are various things that you can develop within the volunteer itself, but in the volunteers ecosystem of people that they are connected to, can we connect them to the others who are already in the youth's lives, so that other than us being able to best help the youth, it also makes it a lot less scary for the volunteer coming in to deal with an issue of like, oh, this youth is not showing up anymore. He's just not showing up for class. He's telling me all these things. I got no time to study. That can be quite a scary and intimidating experience. So when we invest in volunteer development and connecting our volunteers to a larger ecosystem, that can really do a lot to help the youth, but also to support the volunteers.
Yeah, thank you really for that sharing. Especially about the lens of learning to view from the perspective of trauma, and also like trying to find the root cause through reaching out to the other social networks out there and like tapping on more experienced people. I think those are really important points as well for our volunteers. Edmund, given your experience in Beyond as well, how do you ensure that your volunteers are adequately prepared to handle such youths as well?
Okay. Yeah, so I pretty much resonate with what Stefan have mentioned with regards to like this whole idea of like mentor development and all that, because I think we in Beyond Expectation we adopt a relatively flatter kind of like organization structure. I would say like as a project director, we learn from one another, and having a larger base of like mentors with different skill set, it really brings us to allow us to tap on one another's expertise. So we do have mentors or like volunteers that are like NIE trained teachers who can help us facilitate the teaching of like teaching methodology, as well as like how to interact with like youth in a classroom setting and all that. I think these are all the hard skill sets that like we can equip our volunteers with. And we also have people that are specialized in a certain field that will allow us to talk about certain issues in a safe environment like ours. And I think in terms of mentor, like the volunteers development, we always want to challenge them to go and see for themselves. So we organize a lot of like community walk, whereby we let them go into the community themselves in the rental estates that we serve in. to see what are some of the vision, what are some of the picture that the youth see from a day to day. And I think the interesting thing in the blocks of flats that we are serving in is that they have it's a combination of older rental estates together with new HDBs that are being built. So I will always bring the new volunteers to these old estates to actually look at how the view is like on the top floor, which is like I think 12th or 13th floor, and see for themselves what are some of the views that the youths are seeing. And you'll be able to observe a certain pattern or like a certain trend, and like how wide your horizon is during in that frame. And then I'll bring them over to the new HDB blocks. So the new HDB blocks are up on the hill. Is the highest floor is 40 overfloors. You can actually see the Keppel shipyard. You can actually see you can see the CBD area, and you'll be able to challenge that kind of like perspective of like how this community is being shaped, and how the youths are living day to day, whereby they see themselves in this community and see themselves in another block of flat, how their horizon have changed. I think in terms of coming in as a volunteer, we really want to, we really need the volunteer themselves to understand what's their motivation here with us, especially knowing like what are some of the things that we do here. We don't do things in a very conventional way. We tend to do things in a personal level. Some would say that we tailor the program to the youth, but I think these are critical, and these are important in essence of this program, because we are small and we only interact with like, let's say 15 to 20 youths on a yearly basis. So we are able to touch the family and a lot of like human touch point for these 15 to 20 youths. So these are the things that we need the volunteers to actually come in to understand for themselves. Yeah, other than that, we tap on our partners. So we used to come from College and Alice Peter Tan. So that's where we started the program. So we have a lot of like very distinguished kind of like guests coming down to talk about their perspective on the social service, talk about the social landscape in Singapore. And we also tap on Beyond Social Service to actually provide us with proper volunteer trainings. So we leverage a lot on partnerships, and I think that is something that allows us to sustain our effort in the community.
Thank you for the wonderful inputs regarding volunteer management, and also like how do we properly prepare our volunteers. I think that was a very nice way of ending our discussion, and I think it's about time to move on to the Q&A. Otherwise, we will not be able to handle all the Q&A questions that we have in the box, and also the chat. So I think to start off the Q&A, I can shall we start with a question actually from Stefan? So it's actually addressed towards the other panelists. So given the rising trends in volunteering, what is one thing that someone should take note of when looking to volunteer with youth at risk? Yeah, so this was actually a question that Stefan wrote in earlier, prior to the event, and is addressed towards the other panelists. So let's give him priority since he's one of the fellow guests as well.
Oh, I was thinking that since there are so many like Q&A, perhaps we could let the attendees like we could address that. I'm not sure how important my question is. I was just putting it there, but I was thinking there are a lot of interesting questions as well. I don't mean to put you on the spot though. Let me look at which. Yeah, thanks everyone for your question. Yeah, Benjamin, are there any questions that are kind of related to that?
Yeah, I think, okay, I think if that's the case, then we can start with, because the first question by Winnie was already addressed during the main discussion itself. I think we'll move on to the second question, which is addressed to everyone as well. So what do you think are some of the safety nets that can be put in place to help youth at risk? Yuval, perhaps with your experience working with the government in PMO and also MSF, like what do you think are some of the initiatives and like other safety nets that can be put in place?
I think, for example, this is where the location is at, right? For example, in schools, we have like a lot of counselors, and there's been quite a fair bit of programs really targeted for at-risk youth. For example, as I mentioned, like Halogen Foundation, Lakeside, Family Services. They do a lot of direct intervention. But in terms of safety nets, you do not sometimes need to address it directly to the youth at risk, but the environment that they come from. So for example, in terms of job security, in terms of food security now, which is, there's recently an article about food security and its impact within Singapore. So these are the things that I think if you were to address it, would have actually better knock-on effects than really working with the young person as well. And another thing that I feel that more emphasis is coming on, which is kindergarten or preschool care. Because once you already come to the at-risk youth level, right, it may not be the issues that you're facing at that point of time, but it could be very early on issues that has hampered their developmental process, that has attributed to their current behavior. So if we were to focus more on preschool, kindergarten care, and developing that sector well, which I think the government is doing quite a fair bit of, I think then you're going to see maybe a better impact on the at-risk youth when they go into teenagehood.
Yes, may I just add a little bit onto that, to what Johan just said. I totally agree with Johan when we speak of early intervention. I think it's so very important. And I personally volunteer with an organization that works with younger children whose one or both parents have been incarcerated. So the mentors or the volunteers go and basically journey with these young children who may have one or maybe both parents in prison. And these children are as young as, in primary school, P1, P2. So it's very important that we nip it in the bud. And that can only be done when we identify vulnerable groups earlier on. Of course, work needs to be done between the age group of 12 and 21 as well, because these are the formative years of life as well, and they're trying to shape their identity at this point, and nobody's running away from that, and we can't take away the importance of working with that cohort as well. But I think the biggest safety net would be if we can actually intervene earlier sooner than later, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to have early intervention, especially when you look at it in terms of a childhood maltreatment lens. And so perhaps some might have a question of then if the safety net is an early intervention, what do we do with the youth now who are already 16, 17? What can we do? And I think in part one, okay, not necessarily in part, just I guess one thing that we find important is to build strong communities that these youths can be a part of. When we talk about strong safety nets, I'm sure the government is doing a lot of NGOs, a lot of ground-up initiatives coming to do a lot of provision. I can provide this, I can provide that. I'll support you here, I'll support you there. But when you look at if you look at this issue through the lens of community building, we have to remember that as much as we want to support communities, we have to empower them to also support themselves. Because if let's say I'm doing this project and providing that service, what happens when I leave that? Then do they just go back to wherever they, the level that they started at? So there's a lot of community development literature on this, but I think that the most important thing is to think about how we're empowering our beneficiaries. I think beyond social services does this really well in the community work that they do, where when I was planning a sports program with them, and I was telling them that, hi, if I do the sports program, can you get a social worker down to also just sit there and make sure nothing goes wrong? And they're like, no. Can we don't ask a social worker to be present? That's what they told me. They said, can I get a parent from that area to come down? Right? Because when we start to notice that communities, you can label them rental flat community or low income communities or whatever. When we look at that label, it's very easy to look at them as people who need help, people who need all these kinds of different things. But on the reality, on the ground, we see that communities are so strong. There are people that look out for one another, especially when you just live next to each other. And we have to look at the work we're doing through a lens of community building. And I feel that when you build strong communities can be that social safety net when people inevitably fall through the cracks of any of the other provisions or services that NGOs and governments do, right? So strong communities is one possible social safety net. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that sharing about communities and especially the anecdote about your experience with Beyond as well. I think we also have another question right now addressed towards Edmund. So how do you think about sustainability and scale for Project Beyond Expectations?
Okay, in terms of sustainability, I think at this age whereby we are like in our going into our third year of our program soon, we kind of have a model that we can actually follow, whereby we really allow them to have the academic support, which is pretty much lacking in the community, and also an experiential activity whereby it really just come from our planning and all that together with the volunteers. So I think in terms of sustainability, it can be sustained as long as we hold it to the skill. But I think to put a bigger picture to what we are doing here, we definitely want to have a bigger touch point, a larger base whereby we can interact with more youth and all that, because we see a certain form of value in what we are doing here in the rental estates. How we are going to do it is a challenge, because like I think we will just round back all the way to the start, whereby we talk about the rapport with the youth, finding a fit for the community and all that. I think it's something that holds us back as of now on why we are not scaling up the activity. I would say that we do want to put this program try out in other estates as well, like be it Whampoa or like even in the Clementi area, whereby we still have rental flats out there, whereby we really want to help to patch up the gap between this academic paper chase kind of like situation in the education scene. Yeah, so in terms of sustainability, I just put it out there to invite people that are interested to get to know us better, or like get to know the community better, to join us in this course. And I think this is something that I look forward to, especially when there's people asking me about sustainability and skill. It means that they must have certain form of like interest in like what we are doing here. And I think getting people that are interested is the key to driving us to skill up. And I think that is something that we are trying to seek out for. That's also the reason why we open up the mentor, how we do our volunteer kind of like interest and all that. So now we are a youth corps affiliate, so we tap on youth corps volunteer pool as well, so that we get people from a wider range of background. I think this also benefits how we can achieve that goal of like scaling up the program. And I think in the long run, we also are looking at how we can lower down the age group as well. Like we are targeting the secondary school groups, but I think that if we can start it earlier, maybe in the primary school as well, we are able to capture a bigger pool of youth together with us. And I would say that this program is not a one-off thing. We really try our best to follow them through their academic years. So we have youth that are with us for 2 or 3 years. We are already finally seeing like half of our youth going to be graduating from their secondary school years. And I think we are all looking forward to the day whereby they are happy about what they are achieving so far. And I think these are the joy that I can preempt the people that are interested in looking at this field as well. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing about the long-term plans of Beyond Expectations. We also have another question from Ling Xiang Wee. So I think this one is regarding youth at risk definition. So one is, does youth at risk share similar traits as special needs? And also, do youth at risk equals to disadvantaged youth? I think Dr. Tara, would you like to chime in on this?
Yes, so certainly I think as I mentioned even earlier, the definition does not have to be rigid. It does not have to be a textbook definition. And certainly disadvantaged youths are youths who are at risk of developing social and behavioral misconduct, or at least they are those individuals who are routinely struggling in their daily lives. So I would consider them as people who need support in society, and communities should come together to support these individuals. As far as people with special needs are concerned, definitely they are also, in my opinion, and in the psychological literature, you would also see that they are defined as vulnerable youth. So young people who have intellectual or physical disabilities also fall under the bracket of at-risk youth. In fact, there is a major expansion of the definition to even include those young people who have different sexual orientations, so homosexual individuals who find it very stifling in many countries, in many cultures, to come out in the open and share their sexual orientation with their families or the community at large. So, and because of which they experience a great deal of mental illness concerns and things like that. So I think I would not want to limit myself to a very textbook definition of at-risk youth, the more, I don't like the word at-risk at all. Like Stephen said, that if it's a word that we wouldn't use in front of the youth, we actually should not even consider using it when they're not around. But I think for the sake of discussion, we can continue to use the word, but be very clear in our head, who are we talking about? We are talking about individuals who may not be as privileged as their counterparts or others who are around them. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that definitely answers the question. We also have another question from Stephanie Teng. So I think the main question is, what is the best way to address the youth at risk issues? Whether is it bottom up with wonderful initiatives like Impart and Beyond Expectations, or top down through government initiatives, or is it perhaps a mix of both? And from there on as well, how can we as individuals determine where and how we can start being a force for change?
I think if my opinion would be that it will definitely have to be a mix of both. And you can see that the government is also recognizing this with their SG Together movement, especially what the fourth gen leadership of the government is kind of leading that movement, that they start to realize that communities are strong and communities are smart, right? That the government doesn't have a monopoly of ideas about how we can, best support youth. So it definitely has to be a mix of both. And it's not either or, because a lot of ground-up initiatives and non-profits or NGOs cannot really do the work that they do most effectively without government buy-in sometimes, or without the right government connections to really help them to enhance and magnify the impact that they're making. So to address your question on the structural and systemic issues, it's definitely really, really intimidating when you come in and look at the kind of challenges that these youths are facing, and then you think about the work they're doing. It's like, am I actually doing something or not? And that's something that we have like no easy answers to at Impact, because when we think about the youths that we're helping, youths who deal with abuse, youths who are in gangs, youths who are stuck in their drug addictions, and then we think about, Impact, we give them some tuition to help them get past the N-levels. Sometimes we think that if we just focus on education, we may miss the mark. That's why at Impact we also very value that relationship building, because when you build that relationship, one outcome that we try to achieve, that I guess it's succinctly put in our slogan, which is little moments, larger narratives. So first of all, focus on the little moments that occur, especially when you think about the larger scale of things. It's very easy to forget that actually your little moments matter. Moments of when you interact with the youth and you treat them with respect and dignity, and you celebrate the small victories. Those moments are important as well. Why? Because they affect larger narratives. Larger narratives, first of all, within the youths, of how do they perceive themselves? For a very long time, when other people come in to say that, you're low income youth, you're at-risk youth, you're labeled in one way, and it'll be naive to think that the youths are not internalizing these labels sometimes, right? Especially labels of at-risk or juvenile delinquents, right? So when we journey with them and build those, meaningful relationships, strong relationships, through those little moments, we hope to have a bit of change in terms of how do they perceive themselves. And we're always very careful to know that this is not just one way to talk about at-risk youth, but this is how we talk about ourselves as well. When we reflect on the journeys that we've been on, our narratives of our lives are shaped by those little moments of important people coming into our lives, be it family, friends, teachers, mentors, whoever, right? So in part, that's one way we try to answer this question, but I know that there are many other ways to answer this, so hopefully some of the other panelists can contribute as well.
I think, one thing I can add is that there's always, in the volunteering space, there's always the emphasis on scalability and widening your scope. But I don't think you should underestimate depth, the depth of relationship that you can have with one particular individual in your volunteering journey. And really to piggyback on what Stefan mentioned, it's about these tiny moments that, really make a deep impact on an individual. So don't be too, so sometimes you go in there with like a messiah complex where we feel you're the chosen ones to change the entire landscape altogether. But there are certain control. You make a then because mentioned how Stephanie feels disheartened. The fact that you're showing empathy, that you feel that's a need to solve this particular issue, is actually a very positive thing, because by and large, there are quite a lot of individuals who may not even have that care and concern. And I see that you also talk about how can we as individuals determine where and how we can start being a force for change. There's no clear-cut path in doing this. For me, my volunteering journey is like, for what, 20 years? Like, you start cleaning the beaches, then you realize beach cleaning is not going to solve climate change, then you look at other ways to solve that issue. So one thing that you can do is, there are two approaches I do. Is one, trying to make yourself a subject matter expert, trying to go deeper into the realm of the topic. But secondly, is also building up skills that enable you to do that. So for example, how do you be a better people person or volunteer manager? How do you go about being a better finance person? Because these are kind of skill sets that when you do a project or an initiative is very critical. How do you be a better marketeer and amplifier of your initiatives? There's so many things that are going on within the community right now, right? What are one or two things that you wish your friends or your other networks should know more about? Sometimes you don't need to create another initiative because there are a lot already in.
Yeah, thanks for that sharing. I think we also have another question by Jeremy Liu, and his question is to everyone on how do volunteers engage a group of youths who have extreme behavior, meaning someone who is quiet and who keeps things to themselves and does not interact, and the other who is also on the other end of the extreme spectrum, like someone who is very, very outspoken. So perhaps like Edmund, would you like to chime in with your experience given in Beyond?
Okay, I think now that we are online, we set ground rules together with the user. So we said that we will give them a free space to express themselves, even though we are now online. But I think it's good to let them know that everyone has a chance to like speak up and like have a chance for them to an opportunity to join in the discussion. And I think because of the rapport, like the respect that we give one another, this forms the buy-in for them um to let others have an opportunity to speak up. And I think it's also the how the program is being structured, such that there's a comfortable kind of like atmosphere for people that are quieter in nature to actually speak out as well. So we do have varied form of like activities as well that targets this wide spectrum of views that I would say. So sometimes we do discussion based whereby the outspoken ones will have an opportunity to express themselves. And sometimes we do a more hands-on kind of activity whereby we allow them to have a volunteer and their youth kind of like interaction time, so that they will be able to check into the youth. So we try to tailor and switch gear accordingly. So I would say that I would just have to let the volunteers know that these are the demographic of youth that we are interacting with. And I think we should treat everyone with respect. We don't force the quieter ones to speak up like too often. We also don't try to mute the mics of those that are very outspoken. We try to give everyone the opportunity to do something. Right? I think these are the little moments that we have in Zoom. Like we do have like people shouting across the rooms because they see their friends on the chat as well. So they just want to speak to one another. But we like as a PD, as a project director here, I'm also like a discipline master to this program. I would say so. Like I will play my role to let them know that what are some of the times that they can speak up and all that. I think this is also some memories that volunteers can actually gain out from program like this. I would say so. Yeah, so there's no one like in terms of engagement, it really depends on the volunteers themselves. Sometimes I'm relatively more outspoken, so I'll be able to handle the energy of the outspoken ones. But sometimes we do need a volunteer whereby they are quieter in nature to actually handle this kind of like dynamics as well as energy in a whole discussion or in terms of an activity that we are building.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think in the interest of time, I would love for Impact to share as well. But I think in the interest of time, we should address the other Q&A questions. So actually, there's one addressed towards Stefan. So from Sadia. So you explained how youths internalize being labeled as being youth at risk and the negative effects that come with it. So how do you think we can work around this issue?
I think what we've covered so far is that building genuine relationships is one very interesting way of doing that, and perhaps the most natural way of doing that as well. So if you build a genuine relationship with them and you make sure your volunteer doesn't come in first, not have the opportunities that I had exposure to. I'm here to genuinely journey with you and not impose my expectations on what a good person or a good youth should be. When you have someone that really comes in a youth's life like that, their own version of success, that can be really special in terms of changing the narrative. On a larger level, what we can do to avoid labeling is that whenever we